David Burton Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank my honourable friend, the Minister, and of course the Home Secretary, for coming here to this place today to give that statement. None of us in this House can imagine the pain, the suffering and the anger that the Amos family are going through after losing their beloved Sir David. He was their father, he was their husband, and I've met with the family and they are still in absolute devastation. And we should hold them in our thoughts today. We should never forget Sir David, and I pay tribute to him and to the family for the way that they have conducted themselves throughout this whole sorry affair. I will continue working closely with the family and with the Home Secretary and her team to ensure that they get the support that they need and that they get the answers that they need. We'll never forget Sir David in Southend, and shortly we'll be putting some memory boards up on the Chalkwell Lifeguard Station reflecting Sir David's life and also our journey to becoming a city. And I thank Lady Julia and the local councillors for working closely with me on this project. I also welcome the news today that the Prevent Commissioner will be reviewing this particular case and will be reviewing the implementation of the recommendations in relation to this case. And I'm also glad to hear that the Home Secretary has written to Essex Police about the complaint that has been logged. And I thank her for her support in this matter. It's important that that matter is seen through so that once again the family get the answers that they deserve. So I ask the Minister and obviously the Home Secretary to give me the assurances that they will continue to work closely with me and most importantly the Amos family so that we can get them these answers and we can give them the comfort so that they can move on with their lives. They'll never forget, but we can help them to now move forward. Thank you.
Minister.
I'm very grateful to the honourable member, not least because this is, of course, an issue that will be of the most profound importance to his constituents. He's completely right that we must hold Sir David's family in our thoughts and in our hearts today. And he's also completely right that we should strive to ensure, and I know that we will, that we never forget Sir David. The honourable member is standing very close to the point at which I remember Sir David used to stand. He was, amongst many other things, a complete master of the pre-recess adjournment debate. And I can see him now, stood there, confidently, expertly, authoritatively reading off a very, very long list of requests that he completely expected the government to get on with and deliver for his constituents. He was truly inspirational, and we will never forget him. And of course, I can give the honourable member absolute the assurances that he seeks, that we will continue to work with the family and with all members to ensure that both through the work of the Independent Prevent Commissioner and the work that I referenced earlier with regard to the Home Secretary writing to Essex Police, that we will continue to work closely with the family and ensure that they get the answers that they rightly deserve.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful as I always am to the Minister for advance sight of his statement. What happened to Sir David Amos was a terrible tragedy, and though I am new to this House, I have heard many stories of his kindness and his compassion, and I know he is sorely missed across these benches. We owe it to Sir David's grieving family and to the people of Southend to ensure that a tragedy like this can never happen again. And that means ensuring our counter-terrorism strategy is fit for purpose and able to work with communities to tackle the modern challenges our world is facing. The Liberal Democrats have long raised questions about whether Prevent is best placed to deliver this. And as we've learned over recent weeks, these failures are not happening in isolation. So it's right that the government has asked the Prevent Commissioner to look at this case. I would welcome further assurances that the Commissioner will have a wide-ranging remit to take a comprehensive look at Prevent, and I would again urge the Minister to put this role on a statutory footing. This must include looking at how Prevent communicates with other agencies like local authorities and different police forces. Local communities need to be at the centre of our counter-terrorism strategy, whether that means keeping them safe and ensuring they are effectively engaged. So will the Minister outline how communities will be consulted on any upcoming counter-extremism strategies? And as the Minister mentioned, this tragic case has also brought to light questions about MP safety. So could the Minister please provide some more details on how the Defending Democracy Task Force is progressing with its work, particularly in the area of helping to keep members and their families safe? It's my hope that we can continue to work across this House to deliver the effective counter-terrorism strategy our country deserves. We owe it to the Amos family to make this a reality.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady for the way that she's approached this statement and for the very sensible and reasonable points that she's made today, as she always does. She made an important point, I think, about the role and remit of the Independent Commissioner. I hope that she would acknowledge, as all honourable members I hope would, that Lord Anderson is somebody who is superbly qualified to fulfil this role. He is a complete expert in this particular area of public policy, and he brings an authority, a credibility and an integrity to the role. And the Home Secretary and I look forward to working closely with him, but of course I reiterate the point about his independence. She rightly, I think, raised the importance of the work that is taking place across government with regard to counter-extremism. That is work that is underway and is something that is being progressed very closely with other government departments, specifically with MHCLG, but it is a priority for this government, and we will endeavour to update the House in the relatively near future about the progress that is being made with that work. Finally, I'm grateful to her for referencing the work of the Defending Democracy Task Force. This was an initiative that was set up by the previous government, but it is a process that we think is absolutely fundamental to ensuring that those people who step forward to serve as elected representatives, whether it is in this House or local government, whether that be police and crime commissioners or metro mayors, are able to perform their duties without fear or favour. And the remit of the Defending Democracy Task Force means that we will ensure the most effective cross-government response, working with operational partners and with law enforcement, so that those elected members can go about their duties unencumbered by the completely unacceptable harassment and intimidation that we continue to see.
Theo Oliver.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Sir David Amos was a hugely respected parliamentarian with massive popularity across both parties and within his wider community. He worked every day with true compassion to improve the lives of residents in South and Western Leigh, South and East and Rochford, and more widely. This legacy, myself and my constituency neighbour bring with us as we continue the hard work of representing our communities. I am pleased the Prevent Learning Review published today has looked into Sir David Amos's attack. Please can I also commend the hard work from Sir David Amos's family, my honourable friend in South and Western Leigh, the former MP for Southend West, and the Home Office, who are committed to preventing such horrific attacks in the future. We must do everything in our power to prevent anything so tragic ever happening again. My thoughts and prayers will always be with his friends and family. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I'm very grateful to him for the words that he's spoken, and I want to reiterate the words that he made and that the Shadow Home Secretary made earlier with regard to Anna Firth. We're grateful to the support that she has provided and the contribution that she continues to make. With the indulgence of you, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think the Honourable Member has just provided me with an opportunity to offer one further personal recollection of Sir David. He responded to my maiden speech in 2011. I made the speech from over there. He responded to what I think by any metric was a pretty average maiden speech, but the warmth of his response was something that has stayed with me forever. And from that point onwards, every time we saw each other, we would always reminisce about how overly generous he had been following my maiden speech. But for that, and for many other reasons beside, I'll always be incredibly grateful to David Amos.
Mark Francois.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for his generous tribute to Sir David. Yes, Southend is now a city, so we comfort ourselves that on that at least he won in the end. We all miss him, not least myself. I welcome what the Minister has said about an inquiry into whether Essex Police could have done more to protect him. I welcome the Speaker's conference about MP security, Mom. I have great regard for the Minister, he knows this. But I'm afraid to hear that Prevent may have perhaps acted suboptimally is an appalling Whitehall euphemism for errors that may have contributed to the death of an MP in the line of duty. On Prevent specifically, as well as possible failures there, we know that the murderer in Southport had multiple interactions with Prevent, and yet still those 3 innocent children were tragically murdered. We've spent a fortune on Prevent, but it seems that ultimately it doesn't do what it says on the tin. So lastly, can I ask the Minister, as I understand it, the Amos family, rightfully seeking answers, have asked if the errors that may have occurred with Sir David and almost certainly occurred in Southport could somehow be looked into in more detail via the auspices of the Southport inquiry. That seems a very reasonable request given the exceptional circumstances. Could the Minister and the Home Secretary, who's in her place rightfully beside him, consider that request very seriously and hopefully grant it?
I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman. It's hard, perhaps particularly for newer members, to understand how difficult it must be for those more experienced members like himself who spent so many years on these green benches working so closely with a much beloved colleague. I know that, and looking at him and his direction, he's sat below another shield. And members across the House, I think, understand that the pain that is experienced at the loss of our colleagues and our shared determination to work together and with others to do everything that we possibly can to make sure that those who serve currently in this House have the support and the protections that they both need and deserve. He rightly took the opportunity to reference one of Sir David's many achievements, which is the city status of Southend. We all know that certainly wouldn't have happened without the campaigning effort over many years of Sir David. And I'm grateful to him for acknowledging the work that I know that will be taking place with Essex Police. And I do understand the important concerns that he has made with regard to Prevent. What I can say to him is that the terms of reference with regard to the Southport inquiry are still rightly a matter of discussion between the Home Secretary, the Home Office and the families in that particular case. So I'm not able to make a judgment at this particular point about precisely the terms and conditions of the remit of that particular public inquiry. But what I can do is not only reiterate the point that have already been made, but a further commitment from the Home Secretary and from myself to look very carefully at this, to continue the conversation with the late Sir David's family and with other members and work out what is the best mechanism to provide them and all members of this House with the answers that they both want and deserve.
Mike Tapp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The murder of Sir David Amos cut to the very heart of democracy, who's clearly the very best of British, Madam Deputy Speaker. Minister talked about parliamentary security in his considered statement. I've spoken to many colleagues across all sides of the House who have said that they feel abuse and harassment is peaking and many feel unsafe. You did talk about parliamentary security. Of course, it's unwise to go into details of specific measures, but is the Minister confident that these measures will make us feel safer in this House?
I'm grateful to the Honourable Member, as I always am, for the thoughtful contribution that he seeks to make. And best of British, I think, is precisely the right phraseology to apply to Sir David. I think he asks an important question about how we defend our democracy. And he asks about my confidence in the work that we are doing to ensure that members of this House and elected representatives elsewhere can perform their duties with the confidence that they are going to be able to do so safely. I have to be honest with him and say that that is a process that is ongoing. All of us in this place would have experienced threats, harassment and intimidation. I have to say it is particularly worse for women members, and that is a mark of stain on our society, that there are those out there who feel that they can abuse in a particular way elected representatives who are female. What I can give him an absolute assurance is that we are organising and marshalling the resources that we have across government, working with law enforcement, with operational partners, and cooperating very closely with Mr. Speaker and the authorities in this House to ensure that those who step forward to serve can do so with the security and the comfort of knowing that they are properly protected. I will leave no stone unturned working with colleagues across government to make sure that that is the case, but where individuals, wherever they may be, have concern, I will always make myself available to discuss those concerns with them.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to echo the Minister's praise for Sir David, who was a loved friend to so many, including many members in this House. I welcome the statement today, which is clearly very sobering and a reminder of the importance of getting the PREVENT programme right. The seriousness of the statement contrasts quite sharply with the immediate reaction and the debate that followed Sir David's murder, when there was, to be frank, a bizarre and misplaced rush to talk about issues such as online civility rather than the clear threat that was behind the murder. So will the Minister join me in saying it's time for the denialism that we often see about the threat from Islamism to end, and recognising what he said earlier about the changing nature of the threat, agree that as the major terror threat that we face, Islamist extremism should always be the top priority of the PREVENT programme?
Well, I'm very grateful to him for the remarks that he's made today, and I know that he speaks with long experience both of working right at the heart of government and in the Home Office, and I think he makes some important points, and I give him an assurance that I will give them further consideration. I think he's also right, though, to reference the changing nature of the threat. Of course, Islamist extremism presents the biggest single challenge that we face as a country. That was made very clear when the Director General of MI5 delivered his annual threat lecture back in October. And he will have heard the comments that I made in response to the point that was made by the Shadow Home Secretary earlier about the number of referrals, and we are looking very closely at those. But I'm grateful to the contribution that he's made. I will reflect on it further, and I'm always happy to discuss it with him.
Matt Bishop.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Sadly, I never got to meet Sir David, but as we've heard across the House today, his reputation goes before him. He was a loved and valued colleague, respected across the whole House and across both benches. Does the Minister agree with me that he exemplified the best traditions of this place, working hard and working together to make real change? And can we also just take a moment to respect and reflect the officers that turn up at these scenes? As a former police officer myself, attending many scenes like this, it's something that you never want to do and hope never to do again.
I'm very grateful to him for the points that he's made. I completely agree with him. I completely agree with his characterisation of Sir David and his work ethic. And I would also like to take this opportunity to join with him in paying tribute to those brave police officers who step forward under the most exceptionally difficult circumstances for the service that they perform. And I thank him for his service as well.
Andrew Snowden.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I remember the day Sir David Amos was tragically murdered very well. I was serving as Lancashire's Police and Crime Commissioner at the time, and I remember having to have some initial conversations with members of this House who were serving at the time, including the former member for Hindburn, Sarah Brickcliffe, who her and her dad had been lifelong friends of Sir David, and I learned an awful lot about how much of a man he was in this Parliament and how much he meant to people by the reaction from those members that I spoke to that day. And looking at the Minister's statement, just pulling out on the reviewer identified 6 issues. I'm not going to read them all out de facto, obviously, but did not tackle all vulnerabilities identified. Record keeping was problematic. Rationale for certain decisions not explicit. Responsibilities between police and local authorities blurred. Radicalisation, the tool you've used for individuals' vulnerability to radicalisation, outdated. It goes on and on. These kind of words and phrases could be taken out of the statement that were made about the tragic incident in Southport. As a fellow Northwest MP, something incredibly important to us as well. But it could also be taken, there could be words and phrases taken out of many inquiries, many reviews, many statements over many years on cases that are similar to this. And following on from the Shadow Home Secretary's point about that differential between the number of murders that involve terrorism that have Islamist terrorism at the heart being over 90%, but only 13% of the casework being linked to Islamist ideologies is also quite stark. So for me, there are things in this that are around process, quality of following process, quality of work, the interlinking between different public services, but also about culture and about how our public services in different ways have danced around the issue of Islamist extremism and whether Prevent has delivered in terms of identifying and pulling that out and effectively dealing with it. And I would like to echo the words of my honourable friend in terms of it is time, I think, to take a step back from all the individual reviews, inquiries, statements, and take a look at the bigger picture. And I'm not going to press the Minister for a specific answer right now. I don't think this is, and I think the tone that all members have set, this isn't one for point scoring or trying to secure individual things at the dispatch box. I would just like to emphasise to the Minister in his role as he goes forward, looking at this, looking at Southport, looking at others, to step back and just ask whether Prevent is serving the purpose it's there for, whether it is offering value for money, whether it is keeping the public safe from terrorism, and whether it's time to take a broader, more strategic look rather than a case-by-case look.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Member. As a former Police and Crime Commissioner, he brings a weight of experience which I know the House is hugely appreciative of. He's right. The Learning Review identifies a number of points that cannot just sit on a shelf. They have to be actioned, and we have to ensure that the processes that are in place are as effective as that they possibly can be. I agree with the point that he made about the disparity between the figures that he referenced in terms of the number of Islamist attacks and the number of Prevent referrals. I mean, I can repeat the point that I made earlier about the fact that there has been a 17% increase in those specific referrals in the year ending the 31st of March 2024. But I agree with his analysis, and I think he makes some important points. What I can say to him that there are a number of measures, including some that I've referenced today, but some others that I referenced in my Southport statement last week, that I think, and I will need to ensure that the House has confidence, will go a significant way to addressing some of the concerns that he has rightly raised. But I thought he made a particularly interesting point at the conclusion of his remarks about stepping back. and taking a strategic look at whether the processes, the resources that are in place are appropriate. I will do that, but I'll also want to work very closely with Lord Anderson, because I think Lord Anderson is someone who will add a huge amount of analysis and value in this area, and I very much welcome the opportunity to work with him and with all members, including the honourable gentleman, as we, I hope, accept this as a shared endeavour to ensure that these attacks never happen again.
Alex Barras-Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And first I would like to put on record my sympathies to Sir David's family and friends. As a new MP myself, I did not have the privilege of knowing him, but I vividly remember the day on which he was murdered. And clearly from the warm words spoken on all sides of this House, he was highly regarded and is sorely missed. I want to thank the Security Minister for that detailed statement. Can he assure me that the lessons of these Prevent Learning reviews are learned, that all recommendations are implemented, and that there is appropriate tie-in, not just between local authorities, police, national security and national crime agencies, but also with the Defending Democracy Task Force, so that we can collectively work to ensure that tragedies, like this, can never happen again.
Minister.
I'm very grateful to the honourable member for the remarks that he's made. I think he makes an important observation about the importance of coordination and ensuring both locally, regionally and nationally all of the relevant agencies and services are in place and are talking and communicating to each other in the most effective way. He's right to reference the Defending Democracy Task Force. That is a mechanism that I chair that brings together a whole of government response and ultimately kind of provides the fulcrum point for discussing and acting upon these matters in government. And it is our specific responsibility to ensure that the services that he's referenced are properly resourced and are properly coordinating with each other. And I'm grateful to him for the points that he has made.
Stephen Geffins.
Deputy Speaker, can I just agree with colleagues that Sir David Amos's kindness did not know party boundaries, and I in particular reflect that he found himself in a place of unexpected and certainly unsought popularity in the SNP group in 2015, when as a group of new MPs it turned out that barely any member had not received a kind word, a little bit of advice, or certainly some directions from Sir David in those opening weeks. And he was remembered kindly by everybody in our group, given it was a group of newbies at the time. So I'd like to put that on the record and give my thoughts to his family. In terms of the statement, I'd like to thank the Security Minister. Could he set out how ongoing assessment of the efficiency of Prevent Channel will be undertaken going forward? And also, does he feel that he has the full cooperation of social media companies in particular in taking forward his work going forward? Thank you.
Sir.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to the honourable member for his points and for his reflections on Sir David. I think he makes an important point, and in terms of the mechanism that the government will use moving forward, clearly there is the public inquiry, and that will provide a very important forum to ensure that the lessons that have been identified and further lessons no doubt that will be identified will be properly actioned and will be properly implemented. In advance of that, as I think he will be aware, we've also commissioned Lord Anderson to look at these matters. I think he will acknowledge, as other members will, that Lord Anderson is precisely the right person, independent of government, with previous experience as an independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, as a recognised legal mind with credibility and authority in this field, and a member of the other place. And we want to work collaboratively with him to ensure that we can satisfy ourselves and therefore members across this House and people right around the country that the mechanisms are in place are fit for purpose. That is a very significant priority for the government, and I can give him an assurance that we will not rest until the processes that are in place are fit for purpose.
Luke Meyer.
Deputy Speaker, and I associate myself with the comments from both sides of the House about Sir David Amos. One of the challenges with addressing Islamist extremism is the proliferation of hate preachers around the world, both online and in person. And I'm very concerned about the prospect of the preacher Mohammed Hoblos visiting Middlesbrough later this month. I wonder if the Minister can set out the steps he will be taking with regards to this specific case and also the broader actions he will be taking to address hate preachers around the world.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for raising this. I know that he will understand that I am somewhat limited in terms of what I can say. But what I can tell him is that the United Kingdom has a range of disruptive immigration measures at our disposal to refuse entry and cancel permission if it is assessed that a foreign national's presence in the UK is not conducive to the public good. But what I can do is give him assurance today that we'll look carefully at the circumstances that he has helpfully raised.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I can thank the Minister very much for his words. I don't think there's any of us in this chamber who knew Sir David, or privy to know Sir David, would not be mindful of his goodness that he had, but also of his faith. And he and I shared the same faith. As a nation blighted by terrorism and action by evil people who believe that they have the right to take life, it is clear that these powers to address the people must be accessible by intelligence services, and funding to suit must follow appropriately. The action resulted in the death of Sir David Amos. Indeed, those three precious little girls were shocking, and it was clear that there was not enough support for the Prevent programme, and indeed it failed, and we all acknowledge that. We're not saying that in an objectional way, we're saying it in a factual way, evidential way, and that's the point we want to make. I'm hoping that things will change, and I think that's what we're all looking for, so that our UK citizens are safe from known suspects. How can government ensure that public officials and staff who we have as MPs have a responsibility to look after as well are safe in our places of business, ever remembering, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we must be accessible, and we will be accessible to our constituents who elected us to this place. Thank you so much.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I'm very grateful to him, as I always am. Both he and Sir David were and are true champions of this place, and I know the House is grateful to him for the important and constructive contributions that he always makes, and his interest and experience of terrorism is well known and long-standing. I think he makes a very important point about accessibility, because all of us as constituency MPs rightly will want to get out and meet with our constituents and make sure that they feel as if we are accessible to them. So there is, on occasion, a balance to be struck in terms of ensuring that we are able to perform our functions and duty at a local level without fear or favour, whilst at the same time ensuring that activity that we take place locally and nationally is as safe and secure as it possibly can be. I can give him an absolute assurance that these are matters that we attach the most profound importance to. We're working very closely with Mr. Speaker and the work that he's doing on the Speakers' Conference, and I can give him an assurance of the priority that we attach to this important work.
Chris Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a new member, I sadly never knew Sir David Amos, but from what people have said about his dedication to his constituents and his good humour across the House, I think he's a model for all new members to follow. At the Home Affairs Committee last week, we heard from the Permanent Secretary about how Prevent is changing and how the terror threat is changing. And as we can see from the learning review, there are clearly gaps and lessons that still need to be learned. That requires independent scrutiny and independent oversight. So can the Minister tell us a bit about how the new Prevent Commissioner will be able to provide the scrutiny that we need?
I'm very grateful to him, and I completely agree with his characterisation of Sir David as being a model for all members. He's absolutely right about that. I think he raises a very important point, and I completely agree with his assessment of the learning review. It did identify a number of gaps, and those are gaps that will have to be closed. I think, and he will understand what I mean by this, I need to be careful not to seek to provide too much direction and guidance to the independent Prevent Commissioner, not least because, knowing Lord Anderson, I don't think he would take too kindly to that. What I am completely confident in is that Lord Anderson has all of the requisite skills and experience and credibility to provide this function. He's an outstanding appointment. The Home Secretary and I look forward to working very closely with him. But further to the work that he will be seeking to do, I can also give him and the House an assurance that, as I've said previously, we will leave no stone unturned to make sure that we do what needs to be done to ensure that Prevent is fit for purpose, provides the confidence that people rightly will want.
And the final question on the statement, Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And as we have heard today and previously in this place from so many of the honourable members across both sides of the benches, Sir David was a loved and valued colleague, not just an MP, but a man with family and friends, whom sadly I did not have the privilege of working with in this place. Madam Deputy Speaker, we know that Sir David's killer exited the Prevent scheme many years before the attack took place. And whilst future actions, tragically, are too late for Sir David and his family, what steps are being taken to ensure that other, and indeed all relevant agencies along the lines, don't just learn but act on the lessons from the killer's ability to evade detection in the period leading up to his attack?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I'm very grateful to her, and I completely agree with the points that she made, and she's right to highlight the difference between actually learning lessons and implementing and acting upon them. And I can give her an assurance through the processes that were announced previously and again today that we have got the mechanisms to do that. That said, and as I referenced earlier, we will continue to have conversations with the Amos family and with others to look at where there are areas where we might want to do more, and I'm wanting to have those conversations sooner rather than later. I think my final word, Madam Deputy Speaker, is I'm sure on behalf of the whole House, is to reiterate a collective tribute to Sir Davis. He was an outstanding parliamentarian. He is greatly missed, and we will never forget him.
That concludes the statement.
See you later, lads.